was born in Scranton at the state hospital, and my parents came from Austria-Hungary. My mother used to say it was Czernowitz Bukowina. My mother's name was Jenny Shandela. They used to call her, or Babsa, Bertha. I don't know the nicknames, but her name was Jenny Schill. And my father's name was Harry Herschel. My father was a friend of my mother's brother, and they fell in love and they got married, and they had a son, Izzy, my oldest brother. My father was in the Army, World War I. He was in the medics. And he came home on a furlough. My mother said, "It was nice having you here, but you left me a present." 9 months later, she had Jack. He was born in Czechoslovakia. I don't know how she got there, but that's what she had told us.
My dad's father came from Russia. They were Russian Litvaks, used to say, Lithuanians that were annexed by Russia. His name was Raymond David Mayers. And he didn't like the name Raymond, he liked the name David better, so he went by David Mayers. My grandmother, her name was Lena. Her maiden name was Epstein. She lived in South Wilkes-Barre on Franklin Street. And I remember her as being a very quiet, shy woman, and I don't remember her being very talkative or overly friendly to me. She was very sick, she had diabetes, and I had more fun visiting her because of her dog, Dookie, I used to love to play with.
My father came home from the war, and they decided they wanted to come to America. And so they came to America, immigrants, with 2 beautiful little boys, and they came penniless. My mother had a sister in New York, an older sister, Sima Ampel, and she was very helpful, but she couldn't do much for them. But I don't know how come they came to Scranton. There were some relatives there. Someone said they could have a job in free rent if they would be custodians of this Hebrew school. So they took it. It was hard. There was a depression. It was a difficult time.
My dad's father was a shoe parts salesman. He used to sell soles and heels and nails for shoemakers around Wyoming Valley. He'd go around in a truck and deliver the parts that he sold to them. He was also involved with an organization called the Workmen's Circle. I think it had a socialist communist background, and I think it was a political organization in Russia, but when they came to the United States, and they were mostly Jews, it was just a way for them to congregate.
I was born in 1922 here in America, and we had a wonderful upbringing. We didn't have much, but everybody thought we had a lot of money. We had the best clothes, we had the best food. Whatever they could, they provided for us. My mother and father exposed us to all the arts, took dancing, elocution, music, swimming. One time, Izzy got a violin, and he was supposed to take violin lessons, but he wanted football. He wanted sports. So I took the violin. I was in high school, and I went into the orchestra. My mother and father became citizens of the United States. They were very religious. They observed the Sabbath. And we had a wonderful Hebrew education.
My dad was 12 years old when his father died. His recollection of it that he always told me was the one day his dad was parked on a little bit of an incline during a snowstorm. He was in the back of his truck getting the supplies out to deliver into the store that he had just sold, and a truck coming down the street slid into him and crushed him between the other car and the back of his truck. And Back in those days, I don't know if there were hospitals available or what the situation was, but they brought him into his house, and my dad said his mom was panicking, screaming, "Louis, get help, get help." And my father ran down the street yelling, "Somebody help, somebody help." Meanwhile, by the time he got back, his father had passed away. So now he was a 12-year-old boy with a sister and a mother that they had to try to provide a living.
And so his uncle had a big department store in Plymouth, the Leader store. And he said to Lou, "You come work for me." So he went to work to support his mother. My father had a horse and wagon. He had to make a living for his family. And he went into business. He had a junkyard. He used to sell metals. I used to go with him to Breslau. One time I sat on the wagon and he went in the house for something and the horse ran away with me. And Grandpa ran after and got the horse back. He was tremendous. He was tremendous. My mother could speak many languages and could write many languages. Hungarian, German, Polish, Jewish. In fact, people came to her that wanted to bring their families over from Europe. They used to come to our house, and I remember her sitting there writing letters for them. And then they would stay at our house. She put them up until they found a place to live. And I remember one time I had to sleep in the bathtub. And sometimes we would put two chairs together and sleep on the chairs so they could have a place to live. That's how my parents were unbelievable, so generous.
When my father lost his dad, he got a job with his uncle, Joe Osheroff, who owned a big department store in Plymouth. And during the summers, they would invite him out to a cottage out at Harvey's Lake. And I think they were my dad's fondest memories of his childhood. He talked about swimming the length of Harvey's Lake, how proud he was of that.
He worked in the daytime, and he went to school at night. He got his high school diploma.
He always wanted to play with his friends and go play baseball and play basketball, but he had to go work. And he always loved sports so much, and he just never could play. I remember one time he took me when I was I must have been in 4th or 5th grade, and he took me to this Mr. and Mrs. Club picnic. And I'd never seen my father ever have time to play ball. It was a Sunday afternoon, and they picked teams for a softball game, fathers and sons. And I said, "Dad, come on, please play, please play." He goes, "Oh, I haven't played since I was a little kid." And he goes, "I'll play." And he comes up to his first at bat, and he hit one over the fence. And I was so proud of my father that he hit one over the fence. He told me he couldn't even play, and he hit one over the fence. I said, "Geez, Dad, you're really good." He said, "Well, I guess I could have been good if I ever had a chance to play."
My older brother is gone, Izzy. My sister Ruthie was a nurse and she had degrees. She took care of a family, the mother. And then the son came home from the service, Murray Lonstein, and he fell in love with my sister and they got married. He was a psychologist and they moved to Pittsburgh. And she died young of cancer and left 3 little children. My brothers were wonderful to me. I was the younger sister, the little girl in the house, and they would take me to the movies with them, with their friends. And then after the movies, they would take me. There was a White Tower. We used to get hot chocolate with donuts. And Jack was a terrific tipper. And he would tip the waitresses. And I'd say, "Jack, that's bigger than the bill." He says, "Oh, they work hard." To this day, when he'd come and we'd go out to a restaurant, he'd tip. And he used to bring everybody gum. And he'd always give the waitresses gum. Right after high school, I got a job. I worked for this doctor, Halpert. I did everything. I chauffeured him. I did the x-rays. I did the specimens. I did the treatments. I did the case histories. I was his right hand, and I enjoyed it. And then he died at the age of 80. So then I worked for the rabbi, at Temple Israel in Scranton. I took the rabbi's sermons and typed them, and I did the bookkeeping. Jack of all trades. That's when I met my husband. Well, it was Yom Kippur, after fasting. And my girlfriend, they always had a party, and she invited me to come. And I didn't have a date that night, and I was tired. I fasted all day, and I didn't want to go. My mother says, go, she's your friend. She invited you, go. So she invited a fella, Morris Troy, from Wilkes-Barre, and he didn't have a car. So we asked Lou to take him. They came to pick me up, and he said, oh, these are some girls. They have to invite fellas to a party. And I was so sassy. I said, well, you don't have to come if you don't want to. But we went to the party, and there was a lot of young, pretty girls there. But somehow we gravitated to each other, and we were dancing all night. And then he took me home, and he wanted to kiss me at the door. I said, I don't kiss fellas on the first date. But I went up to my mother. I thought she was sleeping. And I said, I met the fella that I'm going to marry. Oh, yeah, that was love at first sight.
I think they were very serious and close to getting married. And my father went in the service, was gone for 4 years.
I went with him a year, and then he went into the war, World War II.
He told me some great stories about the Army when he was there. And the one story he told me, he was stationed in England, and they were waiting for D-Day. The Americans kept building up their numbers, waiting for the invasion. And he had just been promoted to a sergeant in charge of supplies and logistics, because he had been an accountant by trade, and he had a numbers background, so they just promoted him to that rank. And the group that he was with before went over on D-Day a day before he went, and they were captured by the Germans and completely massacred, shot down against the wall and gunned down. He found out later on. He would have been with them if he hadn't gotten this promotion. So, things are meant to be sometimes.
The only correspondence we had was through mail. And we used to write for 3 years while he was overseas. Never spoke on the phone during that time. He said when he was away, he missed me that much more. And then he would tell all the fellas about his Sara. And the family was keeping close tabs on me. His mother and his sister, and Annie Oshraf, his mother's sister. Every Sunday they used to come to my mother in Scranton. And my mother used to make a dinner, and they used to sew. So they made me blouses. They were trying to keep me for Lou.
When they had liberated Paris, he was walking around and he saw signs that said no Jews allowed in the streets after a certain time of the night. And then there was another sign that said Jews had to wear the Star of David on their sleeve. And he was standing looking at one of them, and this guy came over and said, "Du bist de Yid?" which means, "Are you Jewish?" And he said, "Yes, I am." "Why would you ask?" My father spoke Yiddish. He didn't speak French. And the guy said, "Because you wouldn't be looking at the sign if you were just an American that wasn't Jew. You wouldn't be interested." And my father said, "Yeah, I'm just mortified seeing these signs." And the guy said, "Why don't you come to my house? I'm having a Passover dinner." So my dad went to this house, and my father said he was shocked when he got there. There were like 20 other servicemen all there that this guy had recruited all around the city. He found other Jews, and he invited them to dinner. And they all could speak in Yiddish. Nobody could speak French. And my dad always said, it's really interesting, no matter where you go in this world, Jews could speak all different languages, but they'd always be able to pray the same in Hebrew and speak Yiddish. Although in today's day and age, if I went there, I wouldn't be able to speak Yiddish, and I would venture to guess that most Frenchmen wouldn't speak Yiddish now either. He was in the Battle of the Bulge, and he talked about it many times, and how they were surrounded, and it was the winter time, and he was in the office, and they told him to get out there with his gun. And my dad said the cooks, the chefs, the pot cleaners, he said everybody had their guns and was lined up, ready to fight. They were waiting for the Germans to break through. They thought they were finished. He talked about laying in foxholes and having the buzz bombs coming and dropping all around them. And then General Patton came and saved them. So he said a lot of people talk badly about Patton, he said, but they loved him because he saved their ass. got back from the war, and I guess they got married right away and started a family.
Lenny Osheroff took me to Shenango when Lou was discharged. He said he has his blood test already, and he wanted to get married right away. But my older brother was in the service too, and he came home and he had a girlfriend, Claire. And my parents said I had to wait for him to get married first. So they got married in June, and we got married in August. We had an outdoor wedding in my mother and dad's yard. We went on a honeymoon. Izzy and Claire went to Buffalo, New York, and they told us to go there, so we went to Buffalo, New York, and we went on a boat. We danced on a boat, and then we went to Canada, Niagara Falls. Oh, we had such a good time on Crystal Beach. And we lived with my mother and father. They had a third floor. They made an apartment for us.
My dad started his first business. My Uncle Joe kept saying, come back and work for me, but he wanted to get it going on his own. I guess my father felt like he might as well go in business for himself where he reaps the benefits of his own labor.
There was a store in Pittston. The man was going to sell it. So they made a deal and Lou bought the building. It was a hardware store, which he knew nothing about.
He really started on a shoestring because he didn't have any money. So he was really working hand to mouth, to try to get it going.
I was pregnant with Renee, and I used to go into the store. I remember cutting screens, which I knew nothing about. That was Mayer's hardware store. Then he sold that, and he opened a business in Edwardsville. We had a 5 and dime, which he went in partnership with a good friend of his, Oscar Hacker.
He went into business, I know, as partners with Oscar. Then later he bought Oscar out, and he did very well. And then he opened a store down the street called Mayer's Hardware Store. And then he opened another store called Mayer's Dry Goods Store. So he had 3 stores on Main Street in Edwardsville.
We had 3 stores. He used to sell candy and cookies and threads and tools and what have you. I mean, we had everything. We were doing great. And then all the malls came in.
A big shopping center about a half-mile away started to go up. And he didn't want to close his 3 stores and go in there. He thought that people aren't going to abandon him, these loyal customers. And they wound up really putting the hurt on him. And eventually he combined the 3 stores into one as he was decreasing his business because things weren't going so well.
We almost went bankrupt, but he paid everybody back. He didn't owe anybody a cent.
Before he would go bankrupt, he closed the store and moved to Luzerne.
And that was Mayer's Variety.
It was the same store in a different town with his inventory of what he had left, and he made a comeback.
He worked very hard, cutting glass for counters and trimming windows and buying merchandise, and he made a beautiful store.
My father was working every day, every night, every day of the week. He didn't have a lot of time to come play ball with me and do things with me because he was always putting his life blood into that business. So I wanted to be at the store with him. I wanted to help him and be with him. I felt important. When I was at the store, he was in his own environment and he was happy there. And I did everything he told me to do. I used to stock the racks and unload the trucks and burn cardboard for him and mark prices on the goods and steal candy whenever I could when he wasn't looking. I remember I used to steal a piece of candy and he'd catch me eating it and he'd go, I have to sell a couple pounds of candy to pay for that piece you just ate. And then I'd feel bad and I wouldn't eat one for a couple of days and then I'd go back and do it again.
And the customers loved him.
He used to love to joke around and have lighthearted fun with the customers. And, he always took time to do that. It was like a challenge for him to try to make them smile and lighten up and laugh. And I think that kind of typifies my dad's whole personality with everybody. He had that store for at least 20 years and he became very successful and he retired from that store.
When he went out of business, they cried and they didn't want him to leave.
I think the best way to describe my father, the rabbi said at the eulogy, my father was a man that whenever he saw him, always had a smile on his face. My father always had a smile. He always had a kind word for everybody. He never got mad. He never lost his temper. He just was very mellow, easygoing, likable guy. My dad was a very affectionate person. Great sense of humor.
He was just a dream. We had a wonderful life. We had 3 beautiful children.
And later on I found out from my mother that he was always worried that he would die when he was like 40 years old like his father did, and he wouldn't be able to provide his children. Before he died, he told me he felt very accomplished in his life, that he got his kids all through college.
We were married 45 years. It wasn't enough. You go through many things, happy times, sad times, but going through the sad times make you appreciate the happy times, and you appreciate them that much more. I see all my wrinkles, but the thing is I see everybody else's too. And I deserve them. I earned them. You have to think positive and thank God for what you have and live in the present, because what's gone is gone and we don't know what the future is. And today is a present. And just hope everybody's healthy and happy. And you just hope for the best, right?